name is Dave Cohn. I'm Executive Director of Public Affairs here at the Union League Club of Chicago. And on behalf of the officers, directors, and members of the club, it's my privilege to welcome you to this evening's forum, one of a series that the Public Affairs Committee of the club has been privileged to present with our colleagues at the League of Women Voters of Chicago, the Chicago in Focus series. And it's wonderful to see some of our regulars as well as a lot of new faces. So thank you all for being here tonight. Before we get underway and bring the featured speaker here who you've all come to hear from, I'd like to take just a minute or two to set the stage, provide a little bit of context about this gathering and why the Union League Club of Chicago is engaged in this kind of programming in this endeavor. We are gathered this evening in the only private club in the United States that has an institutional commitment to public policy and community service. The reason for that dates back to the club's founding in 1879, but it goes a little bit further back still to 1862, as the Civil War was raging in the United States, not too far from where we are here tonight in Pekin, Illinois. In April of 1862, a small group of citizen patriots gathered to talk about what they could do to help President Lincoln defend the Union. And they decided to form a citizen advocacy organization that they called the Union Leagues of America. That's where the name of this club, the Union League Club, comes from. Their primary mission was to help raise money to sustain the Union Army, because in those days there was no such thing as an income tax, and the appropriations forthcoming from the Congress for the war effort were fairly modest. So the Union League of America movement began as an effort to help sustain the Union, preserve the Union in which we live, and this movement began to spread throughout the northern states, and at the height of the war, there were in excess of 1.5 million Americans affiliated with these various Union League of America chapters across the North. When the war came to a close, most of these organizations simply folded their tent and went back to their daily lives. But those who were active here in the Chicago area, which was near the birthplace of the movement, were reluctant to do so. They kept meeting in the years after the war to talk about what they referred to as the sacred obligations of citizenship. And that included not just things like showing up to vote, supporting those who serve in our military to defend our constitutional freedoms, but also to be actively engaged in the issues of the day as citizens and indeed across the country organizationally. And they thought that it was important to have an institution dedicated to the notion that citizens should inform themselves, should act with that knowledge, to be vigilant of those serving us in elected office, and should basically stay involved not just at election time, but on a year-round basis. And in an effort to sustain those values and to inculcate them in future generations, they founded this club in 1879. So for the last 138 years, the Union League Club of Chicago has engaged in a dedicated program of community service and public policy, education and advocacy. And it is in that context that we have this wonderful series with our colleagues at the League of Women Voters, and we're so delighted to welcome you all here tonight to join us as we again convene the community for an important conversation tonight with Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. We have one other tradition here at the club which is rather important, and that is we begin all of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. May I ask everyone to please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And now to introduce our speaker, please join me in welcoming from the League of Women Voters of Chicago, Pat Wilder. Pat?
Okay, well, first I want to welcome you all on behalf of the League of Women Voters to our first in our series of the Chicago in Focus presentations and discussions. And thanks also to the Union League for partnering with us in this informative series. We've had a very good year. Membership is up. Enthusiasm is for digging into issues important to Chicago and Illinois citizens is very high, and our nonpartisan organization has expanded our number of neighborhood units, making it convenient for members to get together and execute plans to follow Chicago and Illinois governmental activities and issue positions and consensus statements which will help citizens make better decisions and be better informed. We're stepping up our voter registration activities also to include working with more Chicago high schools and their civics teachers to register qualified high school seniors. And it doesn't stop at registration. We're also making plans to promote voter participation and increase the percentage of Chicago voter engagement and our turnout. If you're not a member, we'd love to have you join us. Our membership chair, Pat, is at the table out in the hallway, and she'd love to give you some more information about the league. All right, now I get to wear another hat. As Cook County Sheriff, Tom Dart has looked outside the conventions of law enforcement to bring a practical and very thoughtful approach to the job. And since becoming sheriff, he has introduced sweeping changes at the Cook County Jail. It's the nation's largest single-site jail. If I listed all of Sheriff Jarrett's proposals and accomplishments, there would be little time for him to do a presentation, so I'm just going to highlight a few. Before running for sheriff in 2006, Tom Dart served both as a prosecutor and a state legislator. He has certainly lived up to his promises to bring meaningful change to the criminal justice system that consistently locks up the most vulnerable and neglected among us. He's received a national attention by spotlighting the criminalization of mental health illness, and the reforms he's implemented give care and treatment to those in the county facility. In 2009, Sheriff Jarrett was noticed by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. He's championed the Rocket Docket Law, which has resulted in faster adjudication for low-level crimes such as retail theft and petty drug offenses. And in answer to violence in Chicago, he's implemented SAVE, the Sheriff's Anti-Violence Effort, which targets 25-year-old offenders, 18 to 25-year-old offenders from the most violent zip codes in Chicago with an intensive anti-violence program. The sheriff and his wife Patricia are proud parents of 5 children, and they live on Chicago's south side. Recently, we've had the opportunity to hear about another approach to being a county sheriff, and I'm sure glad that Tom Dart belongs to Illinois. This evening, we're going to hear about the no bail issue, unjust incarceration, and I'm sure a variety of other topics. Please welcome Sheriff Tom Dart.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you so much. And thank you for keeping the intro relatively short. Yeah, honestly, God, there's just, it's so painful on my part to sit there and listen to it. It's like, God, this is so embarrassing. But whether I was in the legislature or where I'm at now, it's like a personal motivation. I've been not obsessed with, in a morbid way, with mortality, but I've been obsessed with the notion that I am no different than anybody else. I'm going to be on this earth a short period of time, and I'm going to be in an elective office in a short period of time. Not that I'm planning on leaving today or tomorrow, hopefully from either, but the reality of it is that I always felt that if given the opportunity, I want to be impactful. So whether it was in the legislature where I would drive my colleagues completely out of their minds because I would introduce literally 120, 150 bills every session and be actively moving on all of them, or whether it's as sheriff where we're constantly moving in a lot of different directions. It's really with that same sense that short window of time to do things, and frankly, from me personally, a real sense of urgency. And the sense of urgency is driven by the fact, frankly, that I am really, really obsessed with the notion that there was never a moment in my father's life where he did not look at me and think that he was handing off a better world to me. I really feel that way. I mean, he and I never had that exact conversation, but I truly feel that. I, on the other hand, when I look at my 5 children, I don't feel that way. I really don't. And I'm not the eternal pessimist by any stretch. I'm somewhat of an optimistic person, but I really don't feel that way. I feel I'm handing them more problems than I ever had growing up and into their future. And so for me, I have this incredible sense of urgency and this incredible sense of action, that we have to be people of action. And that the politicians, and some may know, others might not, I'm not exactly invited to a lot of the parties, for lack of a better word, because it's been suggested I don't play well with others. And I always said, you know what, that is absolutely accurate. The reason being is that I interact with people too often who do not have that sense of urgency, who cannot think of an issue that they can't dream up some committee or some task force to study with truly little, if any, intent whatsoever to actually do anything, and to hope maybe the issue will go away or they can get some political cover, and the very things that have got us in this mess. And so as a result of that, we sort of steer our own path in my office, and we take on a lot of issues that are, some would suggest outside of our lane a little bit. I would suggest it's in our lane. Until they prove me otherwise, we will keep doing that. But at the heart of it, the issue that we find ourselves talking more often than not about is the criminal justice system and the criminal justice need for reform and all that. And when I talk about that, I always try to make a point when I'm talking to folks who are not in the criminal justice world, who are most of the audiences I talk to suggest to you that this isn't just something that you need to take this issue to heart because it's my passion and it's my issue, and you got no. I would suggest if you look throughout history, you would find that most eras, most generations are defined by how they treat different segments of their society, how they treat those who are sick, their children, how they treat the poor, how they treat people who are locked up. And if in hindsight, when you're viewed through the lens of history, you do not treat those different groups in a thoughtful way, you are not viewed well at all. And I would also suggest to you, you absolutely shouldn't be. You shouldn't be. And given that, at the unique juncture where I'm at in this system, I unfortunately have to tell you that if we continue on the path that we're on now, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, we are not going to be looked favorably by people. We absolutely will not be. And this is something that has been going on for a long time. This isn't a new iteration of something that popped up. It's been going on for quite a while. Thankfully, there seems to be a little bit more notice now about this and some people talking about it. But I always tell people, I go, this is something that will define us, A, but you look at it from the standpoint of, any society, at any era, anywhere in the world, the two most impactful things that society can do to its members, I would suggest number one would be to execute them, to take their lives. Number two would be to incarcerate them. All the rest of them sort of comes underneath there, to be honest with you. And yet, when I look at how we incarcerate people in this country, I find myself shaking my head saying, I cannot believe a society like ours, with so many different advances, still clings to something that is so broken, so horribly broken. I look at, from one thing I always found to be fascinating, when I first became sheriff, the entire jail management system, so the system that would tell me everything about the people in the jail, was a DOS-based computer system. I even knew that was bad. And I was like, you're kidding me. I mean, we used to get those big green sheets of paper, that were this wide that would fold over each other. That was literally how we would look at who was in the jail. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Is this someone's joke? But it wasn't. And I often tell people, it's amazing I could tell you who was in the jail, let alone what they were in for and all the rest of it. And is that a society that's taking it seriously? No, it's not. It's not. And was it because of my predecessor? Oh, God, no. He had tried for years to get people to try to change, and they hadn't. We've been able to do it now. Now we're seen as the model for everybody else, and we can find all sorts of different data. But is that being thoughtful? When you look at it from that standpoint, the second most impactful thing you can do, and you're examining it in that fashion with DOS-based computer systems, no. I would also suggest to you, if you don't do it from that level, or the sense of thoughtfulness or compassion, look at it from the financial side of it. The expense involved is absolutely incredible. The best detainee at my place, okay, who just literally doesn't cause any issues, that's $160 a day. If they're mentally ill, which is a third of my population, that's about triple. if they start engaging in other types of behavior, just start adding on to that. So it's a very, very expensive thing to do. So you would sit there and say, okay, well, we're putting all this money in, so it must be ridiculously successful, correct? I'm like, no. You think about it for a second. Can you think of any company that produces any product anywhere that if 2/3 of the product they put out broke within 3 years, would it still be in existence? No. But that's what our recidivism rate is in the criminal justice system. 2/3 fail within 3 years. And yet we keep just pumping money mindlessly into this and doing what? You know, crossing our fingers? No, it would be one thing if this was just some type of objective thing where I'm moving around just parts. But these are human beings. And I can tell you that I have struggled with the notion of how can this be and how can it be going on for so long? And I keep circling back that the reality of it is that I feel that the public just doesn't know. They have a vague understanding of the criminal justice system, but that vague understanding they have is almost all inaccurate. And it's not because they're not intelligent people, it's because they really don't interact with it. And we have a very busy life, you know, it's gotten busier now because everyone can stream everything, anywhere, anytime. And so we've no longer been able to figure out what's priorities and what are not, it's all sort of the same. And so people don't get engaged with the issues, the ones we should be engaged with. And so we have a system that doesn't work. It doesn't work objectively. And that comes from somebody who is even probably a little more embarrassed than the average person, because I used to be a prosecutor here in Cook County for 5 years. And I was never involved with cases that were overturned or anything like that. But as I stood there in front of the court, I swear to you, I never had a moment where I did not think the system was fair. That the people coming in front of the court were guilty. That was, you know, it was proven up by the fact virtually everyone pled guilty. Everyone had an attorney next to them, so they had a right to a lawyer. Everyone had a right to a speedy trial. They had a right to juries if they chose it as well. So the system must work. The system must work. But I'm here to tell you it doesn't work. It doesn't work on so many different levels. And it has been that way for the longest time. And it does not work for people that we need the system to work for the most. People who really are somewhat voiceless. They're the ones that get sucked into this system and have little voice whatsoever, and then gets dispensed with as if they're some type of object. I mean, just think about your common understanding about the criminal justice system. You know, the common notion is that someone is bad, they commit a criminal offense, they get arrested, they go to a police department that arrested them, they take them to the jail, they have a bond hearing. If you're a bad person, they keep you in the jail. If you're in the jail, you then have a trial, then you go down to prison, you go on parole, and then you get released. Virtually every part of that is not accurate. People would like to think it is, but it's not. The people coming into the jail, the people that are only supposed to be there because they're outrageously violent, or they absolutely never show up for court, which is a different story and one that should have a different remedy. But it should be the most violent people in the world? That is just not the case. On an average day at my place, we have probably about 30% of them are in a maximum setting. So 40 on the outside are people you would consider in any level sort of violent. Outside of that, it's just a collection of people who are involved with nonviolent offenses, people who have made mistakes in their lives, people who have committed the ultimate sin for our society, being mentally ill. Because if you're mentally ill, we have a place for you. It's called a jail. That's where we put you. And that's what our society has decided to do, which I would suggest to you is something that's going to be a mark on us forever. But when you have consistently, at my place, 33% of the population in there who are severely mentally ill, and yet that continues to go on unabated. We keep shutting down mental health facilities and treatment centers and clinics. We just keep doing that. And these people keep streaming in. And so you have nonviolent people, you have the mentally ill in there. And a given year I have 300 some pregnant women that are sitting in there as well, virtually all of them nonviolent offenses. So you have all those people coming in there. Well, clearly they don't fit this group of violent people, all right? They're supposed to be in there for a short period of time until they go off to prison. Well, 80% of the people that enter my jail go straight from the jail back to the community. So this notion they all head down to prison and they have treatment of some nature down there, no, that doesn't happen. 80% go straight from the jail back out. In the course of a year, we have about 20% of the people, their cases are dropped. Large groups of them get probation and other type of sentences, and then they go right back to the community. This notion that somehow they're on a pipeline to the prison, well, that's not true either. And where does that come back and really, really bite us horribly? And mind you, everything I'm talking about now, these are national issues. It's not unique to Cook County at all. Though there's sometimes we have our nuances that frankly make us worse, not better. They're unique to us, but most of this is national. And where does it really hurt us that this notion that the public has of, you're arrested, you go to jail, you have your trial, you go to prison, where does that hurt you? Because the way sheriffs run jails, you're supposed to run jails because that's this temporary holding for people waiting on their trial. So it's somewhat embedded in your DNA that you're really not supposed to do programming for people. Why should you do programming for people? They're not going to be there very long. The only people there are these really violent people that are all going to prison, and the other people are just there for this short period of time. So why in God's name would you put together a 3-month program, 6-month program for somebody? They're not going to finish it. It'd be an utter waste of money. So when you look around the country, jails all around the country don't really get engaged with much programming. Is it because I'm good, they're bad? No, it's because they got the sheriff playbook. The playbook said, here's your job. You get a court order to hold somebody, you hold them. You take them back and forth to court, you feed them, you get a court order, release them, you release them. That's it. What they did to get in there, not your concern. What they do when they leave, not your concern. But yet here we are, jails throughout the whole country. We're the funnel. We're at that one point where we're getting everybody, and then we're sending 80+% of them right back to the community. But yet you're sort of, inculcated that you do not give programs. That's not what you're supposed to do. So that is a big problem. Then you look at the numbers too, as far as just how they play out in the real world. You think, once again, all these people are going down to prison. Are all going to prison, they'll get dealt with down there. And on an average year, the last few ones at least, the entire Illinois prison system, so all the different prisons all around the state, they released about 30,000 people. My jail, Cook County Jail, one county out of 102, I released 33,000 people. But yet the notion is, once again, prisons, that's where you program. I'm releasing many, many more people. And yet people don't think of it in terms of that. But once again, the whole mindset is that people are there just for short periods of time. And so what is the point? They get in, justice is dispensed, and off they go. That's not true either. It's not even close to being true. When you look at the numbers, they're outrageously staggering. They're embarrassing, to put it lightly. Let's see, 25% of the people at the jail had a length of stay between 61 days and 180 days. 17% stayed there between 185 days and 365 days. And 16% stayed between 1 and 2 years. I have one person, this is right now, I have one person who's been waiting for his trial for 11 years, one waiting 10 years, 3 waiting 9 years, 3 waiting 8 years, 24 waiting 7 years, and it sort of goes on from there. So are we holding people for short periods of time then? And then, oh God, no. God, no. So virtually every part of this system that, and it's, in theory, is a thoughtful system, is not thoughtful. It's not thoughtful, and who are the people that are really getting hurt the most here? The poor people, the poor people. And those have become the folks that we've advocated the most for. And I shouldn't say the most. I mean, the mentally ill and the poor, and there's a lot of crossover there too, are really like where we really spend the majority of our time working. And one, because I have the strongest opinion that being ill is not a criminal offense. And so if that's the case, I want to tell you, if that's the case, if we're going to go down that road, let's start going after those diabetics too. What the hell, Let's get them too. Let's put them up next. We're going after them as well. I mean, why not? Let's pick an illness. Let's lock them up. And that's what we're doing. And so at any given moment, I have a third of my population is diagnosed with a serious mental illness. They aren't having a bad day, seriously mentally ill, we're medicating them, and the like. The tradition in jails is they just get thrown in wherever you can find a place for them. They get treated similar to others. They will get medications more often than not in other jails. And then when they're ordered to be released, they're no different than anybody else. Out the door they go. The fact it might be 10 o'clock at night, it might be in the middle of February in a snowstorm, really not our issue. We got an order to release them, off they go. But they're acutely mentally ill at that time. That's not our problem. Okay, off they need to go. And so we were stuck with this issue, which astounded me. Once again, a person who sat in courtroom as a prosecutor had no conception this was going on behind the walls of a prison or jail. So we focused on them because of all the reasons I believe we as a society would want me to focus on that. But the other group is the poor people. And we have so many, and it's somewhat of a moving target as far as who you want to define as poor, but the people I'm talking about, there is no really close call here. These are folks who the only reason they're being held in that jail is because they're poor. And once again, unless I missed a memo, we didn't pass some type of new law somewhere saying, listen, if you make an income level of this, we're going to start rounding you up and we're going to hold you for a period of time. More often than not, we're just going to hold you for a period of time and then release you. We're just going to drop the case. And then you just go on with your life then. And we will then continue to do this pattern over and over again. And you know, how can I say that? Well, it's just frankly objective. I'm in the jail, I talk to the detainees there, and it's not just I'm hearing these anecdotes, but the numbers are absolutely astounding. In the course of, I mean, I'm trying to think because my numbers, believe it or not, I do give a couple of these speeches every once in a while. So my numbers change a little bit, but not much. Right now I have, as of today, I have 250 people that are sitting in the jail who need $1,000 or less to get out. I have 120 people who need $500 or less to get out. So what does that speak to? It speaks to clearly, unless the judge had a really off day, which sometimes they do, that this person isn't a danger to anybody. If you're telling me that if this person can come up with $100 and we will release you, that somehow that person's an ex-murderer, I would suggest you probably don't need to be a judge anymore. So why would we set this? Why would we set bonds like that? So we started really pouring into the data and looking at who are we holding in these jails for this long, our jail, for this long. And the numbers were astounding, the number of people that truly were just there because they were poor. So we had this defined population who were seriously mentally ill that we did some really unique things with, and I'll mention that in a second. But for the folks who were there because they had no money, we started looking at the data. Now think about just what I said now, just that though. I'm the sheriff, okay? I'm not the public defender, I'm not the judge, I'm not any of the other entities involved in the criminal justice system. I would suggest to you most people would say, I'm probably the least likely person who's going to be spending his time sorting through all this stuff. But yet that's what we do. And we do it because we know it's the right thing to do. But we find it that if we can expose this to the world, there'll be such an outcry that we'll start changing this. So when we started looking at this, we found that really there wasn't other people looking at this issue. They really weren't. There was a couple of advocacy groups who were phenomenal people, but they were always somewhat marginalized because, you know, they were always sort of pushed off to the side as, oh, that's those typical advocates. They just always are yelling and stuff. They're all liberals and they're all just wanting everyone to go free and hug everyone. And the other problem that they had is that they had a difficult time getting accurate data because the data sets were so horrible, just so horrible. So they were there, they're passionate, they're great people. But from our platform, we were able to have a different type of conversation with people because we're the folks that lock people up. We arrest people, lock people up. And we're saying, no, this is not working. This is wrong. And so when we started looking at this, we did this one snapshot last year for a 30-day period of time. And to show you just how out of whack this is, we just picked two different types of charges against people. To really reinforce the point that we're not focused on violence, we're focusing on poverty. So during this period of time, we looked at all the cases that were coming through bond court for that month. And of all the people, and I don't have the exact hard number here right now, I could get that, but the percentage is the interesting part. Of all the people that came in who were charged with retail theft, I want to pick something that we all could agree is not serious. Only 4% of those people could come up with the bond that was set for them. 4%. People charged with possessing handguns, unlawful use of a weapon by a felon, okay, in that case, over 25% of them were able to pay their bail. Many of those cases, there were somewhat substantial bail. They would walk in with $10,000 of cash, some cases $25,000 worth of cash. But on the other hand, I'm looking at retail thieves who can't come up with $100. Now, is that being thoughtful? No. Is that something that's outrageous? Oh God, yes it is. And yet, this drumbeat would continue to go on. So that's when I went down to Springfield and I was doing things with laws, like this rocket docket thing I dreamed up one day where it was like we'd force the acceleration of cases and things like that. But underlying it is that the system itself is not thoughtful on every level. And as I mentioned at the front, it's all sort of masked by the fact that people have these different rights, but they aren't being utilized, and particularly not being utilized for the people that really deserve it and need it. And then how does all this stuff play out? Well, in an average year, and unfortunately this number keeps increasing too, but once again it was a number that we're the only ones that keep the numbers. No one else was even looking at them. Over 1,000 people this past year served their entire sentence that they eventually got with me because their case took so long to dispose of. By the time they pled guilty 9 times out of 10, or 99 out of 100 times, they had served all of their time in the jail. And where does that play itself out? Well, once again, as a prosecutor who sat there and always felt very, very strongly that the people that I was dealing with had committed the offense. I never had any doubt on that. But as I walked through the jail and I talked to people about the lower level offenses, and you would hear people talk about folks who are pleading guilty and they didn't do it and this, that, and the other thing, I always remember thinking to myself, well, no one would ever plead guilty to something they didn't do. What I can tell you right now, though, is that think about this, the logic of this. Pure logic. So you're sitting in jail, you have an attorney, more often than not the caseloads are pretty extensive, so they have big caseloads. Your attorney walks up to you and says, hey, listen, I just talked to the prosecutor and the judge. If you plead guilty to this, you can leave today. And the guy's sitting there saying, well, I didn't do it. And he said, yeah, I know you didn't do it. You can leave today. Yeah, but I didn't do it. Well, here's the deal. We can set it for a trial. The trial schedules are full. It'll be about 2 to 3 months out. For the trial. We never can tell when, which way a jury will go, the judge will go, and you'll get more, because there's always this notion, and when I was a prosecutor it was still out there too, of somewhat of a jury tax, that if you actually made it, people go all the way to the extent of a jury trial, that you'd get more time than you would if you pled guilty. And so would a person who had not done it plead guilty? That would be a very logical decision in their mind. I get to go home. I get to go home. Tom's a nice guy and he's got great food and all the rest, but I want to go home. So it's a logical decision. And so when these cases are delayed like that, this isn't just a number game. These are real people. These are human beings. And this is in everybody's interest to do this. Just this past year, when I mentioned how all these people who pled guilty because they sat there for so long, and that hit over 1,000, just this past year, we had this other number that we started keeping. Okay, so we started keeping a number on, and it wasn't that difficult to do, a calculation that, so if a person sat in my custody for a period of time and pled guilty, how much past what he pled to had he already sat in jail, okay? So for example, if he pled guilty to a year, but he'd already been sitting for a year and 2 months, we counted up to 2 months. If it was, he pled guilty to 2 years and he'd been there for 2.5 years, we count up to 6 months. We started doing the calculations. And we also then calculated in their day for day, good time, all that other stuff. It wasn't a tortured process. It was actually quite easy. In doing that, we found with all these different people that pled guilty because they served time with me, they served an additional 90,000 days in custody. So collectively, that's 246 years. And when you serve extra time, it's not like you get to bank it and, next, yeah, you owe me, so it's like, no, it's not. And so the system, as I say, as we have poured through it, is a system that has very little logic attached to it and very little compassion. And so for us, these were things that we have taken on as really sort of like the whole driving force behind what we do in the office. And every day we're attempting to figure out where there's more problems like this going on and what we can do to resolve it. So one of the easy things is we went to Springfield, and you want to talk about futility, to work on bail reform. And that didn't go over real well. So I knew that was going to be a bit of an issue. So that is sort of sitting down there. And the reform was really very straightforward, frankly. It was to remove all the cash considerations. And it's been done in other jurisdictions. It's somewhat straightforward, where the determination is made either that you're so dangerous you shouldn't get out, in which case we don't care how much money you have, or you're not dangerous, and once again, we don't care how much money you have. You just get to leave. And so, and there's different gradations in between, you know, where someone gets to leave by just signing a piece of paper, some leave with electronic monitoring on their legs, some leave and they have counselors come to their house. They're also, but it's thoughtful, it's thoughtful. And so that didn't go anywhere in Springfield this past year. There's been a little bit of carving around the edges on some things that are happening now. You know, that's helpful, but you know, we're so far away from where we need to go here. And so that's why when people always are puzzled by my career choices, which when I'm talking to kids at like high schools and colleges about like my career and stuff, I told them, I go, the best way to describe it is just, it's this series of poor career choices that have culminated, that have culminated in my present job. People are always puzzled by it. I love my job. I love it. And the reason I love it is because I'm removed from a lot of the insanity. We don't need committees. We don't need task forces. We don't need to be mired in that. If we feel passionate about something, if we're on to something good, we do it. And we don't really sit and talk about it. I'll often tell my staff that, you know, we do have as the fallback that this is the criminal justice system. We couldn't conceivably screw it up any more than it is. So that's not a bad bar to sort of start with. But in doing that, we've sort of like isolated these different populations and say, okay, what thoughtful thing can we put together around this population, this one, this one, this one? And in doing that, certain ones jumped out easily, like the mentally ill. That was an easy one for me. That was one where I was like, okay, now, if this was a relative of mine, if this was one of my best friends, what would I want to happen to them? Well, I wouldn't want them in jail. But now if I can't make that decision, what would I want? Well, I'd want them to be treated as a patient, not as an inmate. And so what we then did is we turned the entire process on its head at the jail, that when you're mentally ill, we treat you like a patient. And so we meet you when you get dropped off. We have people that I hired who do an analysis of your mental health background and the like. And then if you're held in my custody, which many of them are, then we put you into different settings based on the acuity level of what your issues are. And then we house you with people that are similarly situated, and we put programming together. You get medication, you get programming, and then we do this thing that's really revolutionary. We discharge plan for them. So instead of just disgorging people out to the street at all hours of the night, we put them through a thoughtful type of discharge plan. And mind you, my attorneys, and I keep forgetting, I'm a lawyer too, I keep forgetting that, because I haven't really done it in a long time. But my attorneys were always like really reticent. They were like, Tom, when you get that order to release somebody, if you hold them for any length of time, we're just accumulating more and more liability if something bad happens. And I remember telling them, I go, well, yeah, I get that, but in good conscience, how can we continue to do this? This is wrong, this is not right. And so we don't hold people for days, we hold them for maybe an hour or so where we do a lot of workup on them. But we don't have to do as much as you imagine, because while they're with us, we work with them then. And we do all sorts of things that are really wild with their families to try to rebuild bridges that have been broken over the course of years. We try to work with them on housing-related issues, even job-related issues as well. I had a boot camp program that had been run for years. Boot camps were all the rage back in the 80s and early 90s, and everybody jumped on board with those because it was a way to, you know, be tough and, you know, get some push-ups and yell and scream at people and all the rest. Literally no data at all showing they work, but you know, everyone was in. And so we had one out there and it had been operating for quite some time, and so we ended it. And when I ended it, I took what was the boot camp grounds and I converted it into what we call the mental health treatment center, where it's this somewhat bucolic setting. It's Quonset huts and gardens and like, and you really can't even see the fencing. And they're all open dorm type rooms, and we moved the detainees out there, and they are out there for treatment every day. I wanted to house them out there around the clock, but there was issues. The health part of the jail is provided by Cermak Hospital. Incredible people, administration, a little bit iffy at times, but the people, the frontline people, are just amazing people, but they could not staff it out there, so I can't have people living there, so I move them back and forth. But we work with them, and we try to, once again, reconnect them with family, help them with jobs. You name it, we do it for them. We have incredible programming for them that is incredibly neat. It's just very thoughtful. We teach them, I mean, we run gardens, traditional job type of training programs, readiness programs, all this stuff. Then we have photography programs that are incredibly cool. And we have like this drum program that I have absolutely no idea what it does, but it has been told to me that it's really cool. And we do that, and we attempt to connect people. And so we have now this new partnership that is really, really neat with the University of Chicago, Thresholds, I believe it is, or is it Task. Both are great organizations. I love them both, and I get them both confused at times. But this program here is right off campus by the boot camp, and when people are being released who have a mental illness, we'll take them over there, ones who agree to, and many of them do, where we can stabilize them further for another day, where they can house themselves there for a day or two. We have nurses and doctors there around the clock, and we work with them there. I run a transportation system now, too, where when people are being released from the jail, if they don't have a way to get home, I'll drive them home, which was sort of silly because I remember people were always puzzled, you know, the transportation component, and I was like, guys, I've got hundreds of buses, hundreds of vans. We aren't using them all the time. I go, we can do this. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess we could. I was like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, we can. And so we'll drive people home. We'll drive them to doctor's appointments. And if they have crisis moments when they're home, they have ways to get a hold of us, phone numbers and emails and the rest of it. And they do that. And so we have this really thoughtful continuum that we've put together. We sign people up for insurance at receiving, and I think we've signed up just under 50,000 people have gotten insured from the jail. So when they came in, we signed them up for the Affordable Care Act, and now they have the ability to at least have some insurance options when they leave us as well. And then the city of Chicago, in its infinite wisdom, about 5 years ago, shut down half of their mental health clinics that they had. No rationale, no reason, no logic, no studies, no nothing. They just did it. And so about a year and a half ago, 2 years now I think it is, the alderman in the area of one of them in Westtown leased me one of the closed facilities for $1. And now we run that clinic now, I think it's 4 days a week. We run a mental health clinic out in that neighborhood now. And it's been incredibly successful by staying connected to people and becoming their sort of partners and, you know, trying to work with them. And to me, it's been always fascinating because I have, as you probably have figured out already, I'm usually not terribly at a loss for words. But I'll go over to our mental health treatment center sometimes and just to watch. I mean, literally just to watch. I really don't want to do anything and just sort of see how it's going. And two different times, very similar thing happened. I'm watching the men, they're in these circles that they have, and they're talking about different issues. And when they're done, they're, you know, both times, two separate times, like a week or two apart, different gentlemen are waving at me. And the one, I went over and he goes, I just promised myself that if I saw you, I just wanted to shake your hand. I go, oh God, nice to meet you. And he's like, no, I just wanted you to thank you. I was like, well, we're happy to do this. He's like, no, man. He goes, I've been here before. I've had issues going back since I was a little kid. He goes, this is the first time I ever had any hope and saw a vision. And I was like, I literally had nothing to say. And then like 2 weeks later, they were getting lined up to be moved back across the street because once again, I can't keep them there overnight. Another gentleman, I'm just sort of standing there somewhat by myself, and this guy who's rather big, he didn't run at me by any stretch. He just sort of was walking that way, and he just came up to me and gave me this huge hug. And what staff I had around me was all, you know, having, you know, heart attacks, and the sheriff's being taken out, you know, and it's like he just hugged me, and he was like this grown man who was like crying. He's like, this is the first time anybody ever cared. And I was like, wow. And I just had anything I can say. And it was just like, wow, this is, you know, incredible. And it's sad as hell that this is the type of responses you're getting in a jail. of all places. But yet that's the type of thing that we've been doing. And it's been our effort to try to work in each of these different universes of people. And so whether it's the mentally ill, we have a thoughtful program together. For the poor, we work with them as well to get them out of there. We comb through the population literally every day. And when we have these insane cases pop up where this person is not supposed to be here, we go in front of the judge with the state's attorney with us to get them out of there, to say, listen, this is not good. The judges wildly hate me, and it's somewhat mutual. So it's not something that I've lost a lot of sleep over. But there's this bizarre notion that, someone set this bond, who are you to, to question them? And I'm like, well, that's fascinating you should mention that, because many of these judges are phenomenal people. Many of them are very smart people. But many of them are people that were prosecutors with me, and we never let them out of traffic court. And there was a reason, because they weren't real smart. And the notion that somehow that this number was calculated by someone and came from above, no, that's not how it works. People are human, they make mistakes, we need to review bonds, we need to make sure we have the right people in jail. So we comb through there and we make sure that there's the right people there in the jails at different times to make sure that we're not sitting on people that have no business being in there. And then for the other populations, we have all sorts of different programming that we run with the same notion that we are now at the hub of it. And I think I've already run too late. So I'm going to wrap it up real quick here, and then I'm going to answer questions. But we run some really wild programs, really, really cool, different ways to go after all these different populations. But where else does this have this huge impact? And this is one where I'm not asking you to take a huge leap with me, but really just think this through for a second. And it was just in the news tonight, I was listening to it on the way in here, that the violent crime numbers have gone up now for the second year in a row. And they've attributed 20% of the increase nationally because of the violence in the city of Chicago. And they say that by and large, the violence numbers are going down everywhere, but there's certain urban areas that have pushed the numbers up. So how does this play out? Well, think about this for a second. If you have a criminal justice system, and mind you, we heat map all of these different populations that come in and out of our jail, and we find that there's about 15 zip codes where the majority of the people who come from the jail go back to, and those zip codes are also the ones that have the most issues, the most violence, the lack of resources. They have all that. And so, all this is very logical and it all sort of fits like that. And so, all right, you say to yourself, okay, well, how does this sort of play out? Think about this. If you had a loved one, a family member, who had been brought into the criminal justice system, had been treated horribly, thoughtlessly by that person, what do you think the people in those communities are doing? Don't think they talk to each other? They don't have relatives that live on the next block and 2 blocks over? What do you think they're all talking about when they're talking about our criminal justice system? I guarantee you what they're saying, it is the most thoughtless system that doesn't get the right people, it gets the wrong people, it keeps them there for indeterminate periods of time, then it releases people, it sweeps up the wrong people. I can't conceive of how they would sit there and have this really, really strong, positive feeling for the criminal justice system. So that when violence then strikes a community, do you think that community just can't wait to interact with law enforcement? Of course not. And then what does that breed? Well, that breeds, when you have this distrust, the violence goes on, people don't get charged, people don't get convicted then. Our clearance rate in the city for the homicides, I believe it was the homicides or the shootings, one of the two, this past year, or right now, it's under 20%. So the people in these communities are seeing people that are shooting people, being shot, no one's being charged, no one's being brought in, but they've been so soured on this system, they don't feel as if it's a system that works for them. And so does it perpetuate this? Well, of course it does. How could it not? And so then if you're I'll talk to a lot of these guys that we have in our custody, and they know where I'm coming from, so it's not one of these things where I'm recording them to try to get them on. They know where I'm coming from. And I'll ask them about violence, and I'll ask them about in your neighborhood, do you carry a gun? And they'll look at me like I have 5 heads. And they're like, of course I do. I go, you know how violent my neighborhood is, Tom? And I said, yeah. I go, but why do you carry the gun? I go, and they know I'm asking stupid questions with a purpose, not just my typical stupid questions. And they'll say, Tom, if the gangs have broken up so much, when I'm leaving my house to go virtually anywhere, I'm going to be crossing over multiple gang lines, okay? And if I'm by myself, which I frequently am, and I come across two guys from a faction, both of them have guns, I don't have a gun, I'm dead, okay? If I have a gun, at least I have a chance. And nobody gets charged anyway, so I'd rather be alive than dead, and I'd rather not terribly worried about the criminal justice system. And then you think about the people who are engaged with shootings, and they'll sit there and say, well, these other guys all shot somebody and none of them got arrested. So why not do it? And think about this as well. If you also are someone who's sitting there thinking to himself, the criminal justice system does not work, doesn't catch people, and you got shot at, either hit or shot at, you're going to sit there and say, well, the criminal justice system is a disaster. I'm going to handle it myself. And so when you're looking at why is this something that should resonate to all of us and should be something of concern for us, from the level of compassion, from the level of the type of people we want to be viewed 100 years from now, or just from the people who are trying to solve the violence problems that we have in the city of Chicago right now. Those are all the reasons why this needs to be all of our issue. And we need to work on it with an outrageous sense of urgency. Thank you so much.
All right, Sheriff. Thank you very much. We have some time for questions from the audience. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and I will approach you. We only have two rules. One is please ask a question. The other rule is I hang on to the microphone. Ma'am?
Hi. I was wondering, do you keep track monthly how much money your system would save if people had no bail?
We have different variations of that. I'd be lying to you if I said we keep it monthly. When I need to, for purposes of trying to advance an issue, I can pull it up instantly. So I have the ability to do that. And I do when I'm trying to advocate for something. But I have so much data that I've sort of narrowed it down as far as we accumulate that type of data, but give it to me on a basis that is when I need it. Because the other part is, by and large, these numbers don't deviate that much. They really don't. The number of women in our jail, they're always right around 5 or 6%. It doesn't move around a lot. The number of men with serious mental illness, always in the high 20s, low 30s, always. The females that come in with mental illness, always in the high 40s, low 50s, always. The racial breakdown in the jail never changes. It's always around 75, 77% African American. It's about 15 to 12% Latino, and then the rest is white. So, I mean, I have numbers, some of them embedded in my head, other ones I can pull up whenever I need them, but we do track those when we're using it for a purpose.
Okay, next question right here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Mr. Tom Dart. How are you?
Good, how you doing?
National statistics show that 2/3 of adults with a criminal background recidivate within 3 months of getting out.
3 years.
3 years, sorry.
Yeah, no.
My question is, as far as your job readiness training program, what are you doing as far as resumes that's different when you came in? And, sorry, one more question.
Sure.
And are you keeping data points on tracking them when they get out as far as the job training program?
Yeah, I am.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's a great question, because one of the things that always drove me crazy when I was in the legislature was I always assumed, logic, that there were, every program, government funds, has a metric that's attached to it that has evaluations. Oh God, was I ridiculously naive. Not only weren't there any, that when I attempted to do it, you would have thought I was trying to change our government to communism. They were like, oh no, we can't do that. It's like, why? What are we afraid of? And we were afraid to find out that certain programs that were getting funded a great deal weren't working. So all of our programs, we have metrics attached to them. Some are really, really exciting because they're very, very positive. Like our mental health programs, for example, the recidivism rate for people in the different programs that I laid out is incredibly low. Whereas they were always the highest population to come back in contact with law enforcement, we've driven that down. Where it falters though, and this is where we're starting to play with the numbers and where I've been so helped, oh my God, have I been helped. University of Chicago, DePaul, Loyola, oh, they've been a great help. They'll give me students who spend their time working the numbers. And by doing that, we've been able to accumulate these numbers to really show when we're dipping, why we're dipping, all that other stuff. So we've attached metrics to virtually everything. Some programs are really good, other ones are, jury's still out. On the job readiness thing and the resume, we have definitely that aspect for different people. My goal had been, is to have every defendant, every inmate that comes in there, detainee, slotted into a program. I can't force them to do it. If a detainee does not want to be in a program, I can't force them to do that. And there are quite a few that they just want to sit there, watch TV all day, and be left alone. And I can't change it. We try to really, advocate, saying, listen, you really should engage with us and things like that. And as a result, we have loads of people in loads of different programs. So we have some more traditional ones where it's, job readiness and we work on resumes. But then there's other ones that really sort of go beyond that are really, much more expansive than that, because we really wanted to start using our brains to think, what are the real hurdles when people get out? So for me, it was, okay, what can I do that's scalable, that I can hit the broadest group of detainees to give them a skill? Well, I'll be honest with you, the most scalable one, because I met with the business community as well, say, what will you hire people coming out of jail? And the one group that said absolutely we'll do it was the Restaurant Association. And they said, we will do that, but they need the certificate. And I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's an 8-hour class. We do it. It's a little bit expensive, and it sort of cuts into my money a little bit there. But we're putting a lot of people, and I don't have the hard number on that, through that. That's my scalable one. But then I have smaller ones where we're teaching them how to be chefs. We're teaching them how to work with demolition. We're teaching them all sorts of other things. But the goal is to have everybody in a slot. I can't force everybody in there, but to have everybody in there.
Okay, let's see, we get another question. It's over here to your left in the back.
Okay, Sheriff Dart, you were able to recently, after decades, get the jail out of federal oversight. But are you one bad Cook County Board of Commissioners budget decision we're going to deal with that again? And are there federal dollars that you could potentially find to help prevent that?
Well, I know the federal government, particularly the Trump administration, wants to help Cook County out a lot. The one thing with the federal government, they have never been very helpful. I'll be completely honest with you. So when I entered into the consent decree with the Justice Department on year one, I was literally in office, I think 3 months when they came in or something. I just got in. And did they bring in, experts? Yeah, that was fine. I was doing a lot of that stuff already. The problem is that it was very expensive, and they don't reimburse you for that. They required me to hire more correctional officers, gave me no money for that either. I had to frankly, I started eliminating other jobs and turning them into correctional positions. So they historically have not been terribly helpful at all, and recently had one where it's one of those things where you just want to scream because of the hypocrisy involved here. So here you have the Justice Department comes in, and mind you, by the end, I was their darling. They have every jail around the country comes in to meet with me, to watch what we do, all the rest. Oh, fine, whatever. But when I started asking, because we started driving down a lot of the bad numbers, stabbings stopped, fights, falling off a cliff, use of force by my officers on detainees, falling off a cliff. All those things go in the right direction. I always tell my staff, I go, the one thing that I always found that we completely dropped the ball is we never compared ourselves to anybody. We're always comparing ourselves to ourselves. And so you never have a bar then. Well, the difficulty is what I had said on the front end. Jails all around the country are, hoping to get into the DOS system now. They're still, it's all paper. And so when you can't go anywhere to get any information. So I said to myself, okay, to set just a bar, I wasn't trying to be cute or anything like that. To set a bar, I'm going to reach out to the federal prison system and ask them, what are your statistics for use of force? So I can know whether we're doing good or not. So I reach out to them. They explain to me that in spite of the fact one, law enforcement agency or another, they can't give me that information. I have to seek it by freedom of information. I was like, fascinating, okay. And they say, by the way, that will take 12 months. I was like, wow, fascinating. I go, we don't get that type of ability to pull documents together, but you guys are special. You're so special. So it went off my screen for a while. Then all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, something like that, I get this envelope. It comes in, I open it up, and sure enough, it's from the Bureau of Prisons. And it's about like 20 pages, and the 19 pages on the bottom are all literally gibberish. It's like code or something. It makes no sense. I was like, fascinating, fascinating. And then I look at the front page, their entire response to me, which was a detailed quest, asking them to pick your different prisons all around the country, pick the MCC here, pick LA, wherever you want, give me your by year use of force on inmates, the number of cases that are sustained, all this stuff. They gave me a one-page document in which they said, they literally, in the document, they said during that period of time, which I believe was a 3 or 4 year period of time, they had no use of forces at all. Physically impossible, physically impossible. And so when you talk about trying to get help from them, I can't even get a straight answer out of them. And that was, Frank, as I say, long before Trump came on the radar screen. They have been like that. They're an insular group. They're very, very quick to point out other people's issues, but when you actually go to them to say, listen, how are you guys doing it? Can you help me? Show me this, that, and everything. Absolutely nothing. And so I haven't been looking for that. Our own county budget issues are concerning to me, I honestly do not know how that all is going to play out right now. We're preparing for multiple scenarios right now and how we can do things, but I've given them a couple, not scary scenarios, but where we'll need to shut down some branch courts or things like that, but we'll have to have some major savings if we have some of these issues with the taxes and the rest.
Sheriff, next question's right in front of you, sir.
Sheriff, I have one question. Based on your history of bad career decisions,
Yeah.
what's your next one?
My next bad one? Yeah. Yeah, I've had some people suggest some really bad ones to me. You know, I honestly don't know what I want to do. And I mean that because it's not because I'm fickle by any stretch. It's because, A, my wife and I have 4 little kids. And even though I'm in the office probably 10, 11 hours every day, but I'm not in the office on the weekends. You know, I'm on the phone a little bit here and there. But I'm able to take my kids to school every morning, and I'm home by 8 or 9 at night. And so I'm able to be a good dad. I'm there. And that's really the most important thing to me. And so some of the other bad careers that have been pushed on me, I worry if those will just suck the life out of me, because I'm somewhat compulsive in that sense. I'm on something, I won't give up, and I'll just keep working, and the next time I look up, it's like midnight, and it's like, oh God, I didn't get there. So I'm balancing those things, A, and B, I really do like my job a ton, and I feel because of all the things we've done, we've positioned ourselves where objectively we're the leaders in the country on this issue, which I consider such an important issue that I just don't want to, it'll never be perfect, but I know there's just more we need to do. I've got some more really crazy ideas. They're really cool, but they aren't completely to fruition yet. I mean, so I struggle with it. And I've told someone too, I think at the end of the day, the other part of it is, you know, I mean, a lot of these people in the political world are incredibly ambitious. I'm ambitious to do good things. I work, I take on tough issues, I upset tons of people. So it's not like I'm looking for an easy path, but politically ambitious, if I never had another title in my life, life is good. I don't care. I don't need to feel that I had this job or that job, and you know, I just don't, I do not have that in me. And so I think sometimes that might limit me, because I think when you go into some of these other jobs, you have to just, that's gotta be like this driving passion in your life.
All right, Sheriff, next question's right down here.
Hi, Sheriff Dart. I should preface my question by saying this issue of programming is very near and dear to my heart as a Chicago public school teacher and a yoga instructor at Cook County Jail with some other fellow yoga instructors here. And you mentioned that programming is mostly for prisons, that in the jail, because if sentences are shorter, that programming shouldn't really need to occur in a jail environment. So
No, I believe it should.
No, I know you do,
Yeah.
but I'm just saying that you said that others may feel that way. So do you experience pushback regarding programming at Cook County? And if so, like, what does that look like and how do you combat it?
You know, it's been recently pushing back more lately because with the budget issues and stuff, it's been suggested to me by some people in the county board, maybe you just need to stop doing the mental health stuff, Tom, and maybe some of these other programs you can cut back on, which I've said no. You know, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So there has been more pushback on that recently. The educational component has always been a tricky one for me because for years I've tried to work on the issues of the York school that's on the compound there. When I say work on the issues there, it was really just trying to get more information. And honest to God, I could get like virtually no information. Because I kept telling people, I go, listen, I'm not looking to run it. I do not. I would like to have less employees, not more. So that's not what it is. But I would really have a hard time looking someone in the eye if they said X and Y went on in this school and it's in your jail. And for me to say, well, I didn't know anything about it. And they say, well, isn't that literally right outside your window, Tom? Yeah. And were you not at least a little bit quizzical about what's going on in there? No, not my concern, which is not my shtick. And so I always struggle to try to get more and more information out of there because my feeling, and I really was looking for a more robust discussion on this, is that because of the nature of the populations and our ability, particularly now, to more clearly identify populations, when people come in with certain charges, you could literally almost bet your house, this is how long they're going to be in the jail, and then they're absolutely going to prison for a period of time. I'm not saying that we then ignore them. I have some program for them, but I would rather take like the educational dollars and spend almost all of those on the other larger population, which are the people that are coming in and out and in and out, and spend that on educational programs that are specifically geared toward transient populations, A, and then a big hook being connecting them when they leave, to put a lot of thought into a bridge back to the community. And I've always thought that that would be a just much more thoughtful way to deal with this, as opposed to having just a traditional sort of school concept in the jail and then off they go to prison. And so I'm going to continue with the programming. I'm looking for better education programming, and I'm really open to ideas. And I mean that. I mean, I meet with people all the time who have ideas. And so if you guys come up with one, some iteration, some variation, I'm all ears.
Sheriff, I think we have time for a couple more questions. There's one back here.
Yes.
I just wonder about your thoughts on an issue broader than your office. I wonder what you think about the trend toward for-profit incarceration, and if you have any thoughts about how we can turn that trend the other way.
The what? I'm sorry.
For-profit incarceration.
Or what someone has referred to as the prison industrial complex. That is incarceration as a business.
Yeah, you know, see, because of laws that have been on the books here in the state, we don't have private prisons. So not typical. The issue in those states are very, very different than ours, where there's a definite profit motive involved and there's definite ulterior motives with a lot of people. What I have found, and I absolutely could be wrong, what I have found is that the end result is the exact same. So whether or not it was because of a prison industrial complex or what I'm about to say, the end result is the same. So it's bad, period. What I have found is that the misuse of the criminal justice system, the mass incarceration, the wrongful incarceration of people is more by benign neglect. That there isn't an affirmative thing. There's occasional really dumb type of programs, you know, 3 strikes you're out and things like that that aren't connected to reality. So there's occasionally things like that. But the real problems with the system are because we aren't treating people like individuals. We aren't treating them like people. And that's just a person that, you know, they must have done something wrong, you know, that they're there. And yeah, are the wrongful convictions horrific? Yes, they are. But they sort of suck all the air out of the room, and no one sits there and talks about all these people who are languishing in there for 2 months and didn't need to be in there at all. 18 months, and they needed only to be there for 3 months. Those are the ones that I find that are completely ignored, and the ones that really make the system so out of whack, that spoils it. It poisons it everywhere, because so few families are not impacted by that. In these neighborhoods that we're talking about that are in tremendous crisis, there's not many of them that aren't impacted by those type of issues. And so, you know, it's just not the system I think anybody would ever be proud of. And there's great people in there, as I say. I have my issues with the judiciary. There's some judges that are just the most incredible, passionate people I've ever met. The problem I've always had, though, is there's no distinction between them and the people who are just collecting a check. Just collecting a check. That they all get retained. Everyone gets retained, you know, so no one's ever pushed out of office. They get paid the same $200,000 a year with this great pension system, and it doesn't deviate. And when I was a prosecutor, I had, I guess, the benefit of being in front of a phenomenal judge who, if we did not move cases collectively, us and the public defender, he made life hell for us. But it was, for me, I was a young guy and I wanted to, try cases and stuff. But then I went to another courtroom. We did nothing, and we were out of there every day by 1 o'clock. The judge could care less. And I think in the back of his mind, he knew if the case got older, they would eventually plead guilty, and no one has to do any heavy lifting. We're out of here by 1 o'clock every day. You can't have a system like that.
Sheriff, we have time for one last question.
Do you have any plans to release pregnant women from jail to home confinement? And if so, what are some of the details? How are you going to do that?
Well, we have a bill that we put together to put it in statute, because we sort of went toe-to-toe with the judge just recently over this issue. And I was of the opinion that we really ought to put this in statute as opposed to leaving it to me to catch it, because we found it. We found her sitting there when we were just doing our search through the population one day, and was like, what is she doing here? And then we looked, she had been given like a 2-month court date or something, where clearly she was gonna have the baby during that period of time. And her reason for being in custody was she just didn't show up for court. And so none of it made any sense. And so we figured the best route would be, let's just legislatively change this so it just won't occur ever again. So the bill I have, I wrote, basically says unless you're charged with a crime of violence or there's an issue with violence against a baby or something like that, I can't remember the exact terminology right now, that there has to be an extraordinary showing for you to be held in custody. And so I don't have the precise language, but I went through like 3 rewrites of it, and I remember at the end I felt very confident that the only time you're going to have a pregnant woman in the jail is going to be if she's somebody who is really violent. And we have those. I mean, we do. I mean, I had this horrifically evil woman who tortured and murdered her child, and she was pregnant when we arrested her. And so I would never want her out. I mean, if she has her baby there, so be it. And then the child welfare system better get away from her as quick as possible. So I think we wrote it in a way where it'll be clear that we're just not going to do this stuff. I don't know. I just wrote it about a week ago or 2. So yeah, I don't think we have one yet. But I think we'll have a couple in mind. Like Kelly Cassidy works with us on a ton of stuff, and Ann Williams does. So I mean, we work. So I don't think we'll have a hard time finding a sponsor.
Sheriff Dart, you're incredibly candid. You admit to human fallibility, and you answer direct questions with direct answers. If you have any future in politics, you're going to have to stop doing that stuff. Ladies and gentlemen, Sheriff Tom Dart. Appreciate that. I know we could stay here for much longer, and the sheriff may be able to stay here for a little while to interact with you. I want to thank you again so much for coming tonight. Thank our friends at the League of Women Voters of Chicago, and we never let our speakers leave without expressing our appreciation through some modest parting gifts, all of which fall under the gift ban rule. They are de minimis expenses, so since he spends a lot of time examining issues and staying up late in the night looking at databases produced by DOS spreadsheets, he's going to need some caffeine. So we have a lovely Union League Club of Chicago travel mug for you. And my colleague Pat has, from the League of Women Voters, something as well. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. We are adjourned. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. Have a good night.